Olsen is going through is horrible. Horrible.
When did we get together and collectively decide that being annoying is a crime? I'm serious. Like, we have shifted to a point that being annoying warrants some of the most violent, aggressive bullying that I've ever seen. And I want to start by saying something very clearly, because it seems like we've lost the plot on this. Just because you're annoyed by something doesn't actually make that thing annoying, first. But let's say for the sake of argument that it did. I'm curious, as a collective, as a culture, why and how we've gotten together and decided that if a person or a thing is too annoying, it is our God-given right to obliterate their existence from the digital and three-dimensional planet that we occupy together. It's eerily arbitrary. Like, if enough people get together and feel a sense of annoyance towards something, we suddenly have license to behave in some of the most vicious ways I've ever seen. I truly think it has to do with the way that our brains have been conditioned and trained algorithmically, so we have no distress tolerance when it comes to encountering a person, an aesthetic, a type of personality that doesn't necessarily vibe with us. It's giving very much bean soup. We're so used to experiencing such a curated, blinders on lens in terms of consuming content creators, consuming people, that we forgot what it means, that it's also a very normal experience to see something, be a little irked by it, and keep moving. I think for this also, there's been such a rise in punishing cringe content. There's been so many cases of this over the last couple years on this app. Thinking of the Love Surge couple, for example. And this lack of distress tolerance is very bizarre. Like, I see people describing a felt embodied experience when they see something that's cringe or irritating to them. Like, that felt sense of secondhand embarrassment is inside of their body and they're unable to regulate it. This is wildly disproportionate responses, just very, very small things. And the cycle of it is so bizarre. So essentially what will happen, right, is somebody will do something cringe or annoying and be absolutely ripped to shreds. Like, we want to take the spot that they exist on the planet and like snuff it out. And then after that cycle continues for weeks or months, time is so strange on social media. We don't even know how long the actual human being is enduring this level of violence, like interpersonally, socially, emotionally. And then people start to pause. It's almost like a shame cycle hits in once they've worked out all their weird aggression on this human being. And people start to go, well, is it that big of a deal? And then they start to feel bad. And it's wild because the concept of collective accountability isn't really spoken about at all. Like, we're really big on holding individuals or influencers or content creators or brands accountable. And we have very high standards for what that looks like, often with the same kind of style of dogpiling. But when we collectively get together to annihilate a person for the simple crime of being annoying, then we're just like, oops, sorry. And this really speaks to how the internet is a weird place. Like, no acknowledgement to like what that person legitimately had to endure, threats like to unaliving threats, wishes for them to unalive themselves. It's crazy. And I don't think we think enough about what characteristics are wrapped up in the things that we consider annoying. I think a lot of the time it has to do with this sort of resentment that has been fomenting for many, many years around who is pedestaled and how we de-pedestal them, right? We take people, we put them on pedestals, we really, really like them, and we start to see them become successful, and then we relish tearing them apart. But I think also certain personality traits, certain ways of being that aren't necessarily categorized as cool are often, frankly, just ableist or racist. And I'm not saying that's necessarily the case for Chris Olsen. It's just something that I've noticed that I find to be really bizarre and that people aren't critically engaging with enough. Like, why does this bother you so much? Why are you so affronted by the experience of annoyance? And why does the fact that someone else is annoying to you trigger you to such a point where you feel like you now have the right to dehumanize them entirely? Like, it makes perfect sense to me that people like Trisha Paytas existed in just like deranged cycling identities and characters of just like bizarre and horrible proportion, because the virality of this obviously is attached to like social capital, social reward, and financial reward. But also, like, I don't think we're thinking about what it does to someone's brain to receive like millions and millions of statements, explicit and subtle, that they shouldn't be on the planet because they're kind of weird and irritating. Like, what that does to your sense of identity and self to feel rejection at that scale for something like that's altogether pretty innocuous. These people aren't out here like committing crimes against others. They're not out here hurting others and doing damage to their communities. They're just out there with a personality type or a way of expressing themselves that you're not vibing with. And there's a very strange way that, like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the concept of mutual discovery, but it's basically this idea that like lots of different scientific and philosophical ideas were discovered around the world all the time. And this is the same thing that happens when we decide to like essentially annoyance guillotine people, right? Somebody that maybe you felt was banal or neutral, or maybe you even liked, when you start to see the inundation of comments calling them annoying, calling them cringe, you actually start to develop negative sentiments towards them yourself that you never had before. Truly, this is one of my biggest fears of life. It's one of my biggest fears of being on the internet and having a platform, is that all of the things that people enjoy about me now will one day go into this strange space of, there's something weird about Jamila though. There's something off about them. And people will get together and key around that. And that cycle, that spiral will eventually just swallow me up until I'm no longer human. I'm literally just a cringy, irritating punching bag. We need to do way better. And again, I'm not caping for like ultra rich like content creators and influencers. That's like not my jam. But I do think there's something that's very high school and terrifying intersecting with just the sheer volume and scale of the internet here that deserves examination. In addition to just like I said before, the obviously ableist and racist undertones, ageist as well. Like somebody could do the same exact thing as an older person and be perceived as like gross for doing it, gross for wearing it, etc. And I think it just punishes even on a base level that's more accessible to everyone, like the concept of earnestness, the concept of being earnest. If you are somebody that is traditionally not that conventionally attractive, or you're somebody that, you know, makes a certain type of content that isn't related to your aesthetics, and you try to do an outfit of the day, or you try to do a cute dance, or God forbid you try to do makeup and it doesn't look perfect, people will absolutely annihilate you for the crime of not being good enough to be torn apart later anyway, for the crime of not being beautiful enough or having to try so hard that the effort is visible. It is the definition of punching down. It is the grossest, yuckiest thing. It needs to be knocked off expeditiously. Also, where is any of that heat for people actually committing atrocities? Where is any of that pressure, any of that vitriol for people that actually deserve it? Get it together immediately.